Hi everybody, this is Alex at Belate Sports. I'm going to be talking about today the differences between the spoon monoblock caliper right here that's on this car and the differences between the spoon twin block caliper. Initially, what you're going to see is this one is a two-piece caliper. You can see right here, the split in the middle and the bolts on the back side right here, versus this is the monoblock caliper. Let me get closer here. And you see where you have the single piece design, where that's why they call it the monoblock. Both of them use the same size pistons. We have a 38 millimeter piston and a 42 millimeter piston, and that's what we're basically going to start talking about, the major differences. When I just put them up close to each other, they look very, very similar. Very, very similar. Like the shape is very similar, but you could see the twin block is thinner, and I'll take measurements in a minute here. You can see it's thinner material, and that's good for brake clearance versus the monoblock. Also, what you see is on the bottom here, the backside, these are basically molded to fit one size, where I suspect that the reason why Spoon made a monoblock was to be able to radial mount the bracket to any different size knuckle. So they have more uses out of having a monoblock to be able to adapt it to different vehicles. And this is on an S2000 right now. Let's go to measure this from end to end here. From end to end, we're about a little under 120 millimeters from end to end right here. And then on a monoblock, from end to end, we're at 130 millimeters. So 10 millimeters, a little bit more than 10 millimeter difference in width. So on this face, I'm guesstimating about 5 millimeters and 5 millimeters that way. On wider than this guy. And then the height on, I'm gonna try to measure the height as best I can right here. The height is about, can you zoom in right here on this side? The height is about 200, I'd say from end to end, 255, 260 millimeters. Where on this one, from end to end, we're about 240 millimeters. Where this one's 255, 260, about 20 millimeters, 15 and 20 millimeters taller, and then 10 millimeters wider than this caliper, than this monoblock caliper. Excuse me. Originally, this Spoon twin block this was one of their first caliper designs that was meant to be installed on the older Civics and Integras. Actually, this is direct fit to the Integra Type R and the EK9 Civic Type R. And this bolts right here, it just bolts straight to the knuckle. Okay. One of the biggest differences that I can see is the brake pad. This is the S2000 brake pad, and this is the Integra Type R brake pad, or the NSX brake pad. If you look at the biggest difference here, this is the S2000 pad, and it is substantially smaller than the NSX brake pad, or the DC2 Type R brake pad. See here how much smaller it is when you line up the pads. I estimate there's about 25% more brake pad material on the Integra Type R brake pad than the S2000 brake pad. Now, the S2000 brake pad is what's used on the monoblock, okay? The Integra Type R brake pad is used on the twin block, right here. So, when I saw these two calipers, I kind of asked myself, why didn't Spoon just make the twin block shape or brake pad for the S2000 versus this was direct fit for an 11-inch rotor for the Integra Type R? And to show you, here is an S2000 brake knuckle with a rotor. And when we try to put this caliper on, so we go all the way up to here. It actually looks pretty good where it could fit, but when you look on top of here, the holes don't line up. They're off. They're off a bit, and you can't get them to line up. So that's this part of it. And then also the benefits would be the size. Would be the size difference. This is a lot thinner than the monoblock caliper. You know, the drawback would be the fact that it's two-piece versus the monoblock is single piece. When I ask the question like that, why didn't they do that? Then I start thinking, maybe I can do that and try something new to redesign something that's been existing. This is from like the 90s. And then this one, I think, came out in the early 2000s. So it's about, you know, 20 years old designs, and maybe we can kind of reinvent these designs into something new. And so this is the beginning start of it, where you see this. I bought basically one of the spoon replica twin block calipers, you know, online, and I started cutting it up. I started hacking it up so that way I could get it to measure out the way I want it to. Now this was just basically just to get started, you know. Then you see I cut out the ears on the back half of the twin block using a machine shop, you know, that I have available to me. And we cut these out, cut that portion out, and then basically I had to find a place to weld this aluminum to the caliper for me. Just basically it was just for mock-up. It wasn't, these were never intended to be used or on actual car, just so that I can get the design shapes. And then so I can send that back to the factory, and then they could recast this whole block and forge a new mold. And then afterwards, you see, this is what we end up with, where after everything's been welded together and the aluminum has been added and elongated in the new position for the holes, for the threaded holes to be able to mount up to the caliper. And then this is a picture of the other side caliper, the unmodified replica caliper. And then you see the difference with the after modification, after we changed it all, and the difference in the bolt holes, where the position is. This is the S2000 knuckle that I showed earlier. And now this is the first mock-up when we bolt everything together and just see all the different, the spacing and whether or not the brake pad sits perfectly and so on and so forth. Then finally, I send all that in to the factory, and then they scan all of that and then draw up a CAD design. And that's how things get made. This took me literally just to get up to this point, I think it took me about 6 to 7 months just to get to here. And here's another picture of the CAD design. And then we get to, this is where the finished mold comes out afterwards. You see, this is a whole new forged casting and machined to be the design that I initially started out or sought out for. And that's where we came up with this. This design, this twin block design, had already been copied over in China for many years now. So you see the difference right here? This is an original spoon caliper, twin block caliper. And you see the casting difference on the back side is completely different, where it's elongated to be able to fit the S2000 knuckle. And I'll show you right here. So now, when I install this caliper, I have some bolts I'm going to put together right here. So now you can see when I install this new molded caliper, everything fits perfectly. So it fits the 300 millimeter stock S2000 rotor. We have plenty of gap here for the rotor to move freely, and we now can use a 25% bigger brake pad than the spoon monoblock, or just in general, even just the stock caliper, which is the stock S2000 brake pad. And again, I've shown the differences on that just earlier. It's pretty significant. Show it again here, where it mounts up versus this one. The ears are not long enough. Going back to what we wanted to do was get the benefits of a thinner caliper, which is good for wheel clearance. So now you have more wheels that can fit the caliper versus the monoblock. And then we ended up with this shape. Did we borrow the design from the spoon twin block? Yeah, absolutely. But this was already been in circulation, copied. So we took what was something that was a replica and reimagined it into something that could be more original, because this was never made for the S2000. It was made for the Integra Type R. And so we changed it to be an original idea at this point. That's everything that we wanted to show in this design and versus this design, and then versus the benefits over this design. So this is the finished product after it's installed onto the car. This is a stock S2000 AP2 wheel, and with this one we still need a spacer, but not as big of a spacer as what we would with the bigger monoblock or any of the other calipers. This one's actually a 15 millimeter spacer, but I'm pretty sure we can get away with a 10 millimeter spacer, because the gapping right here we have is pretty large right here. If we wanted to go 10 millimeters, we probably could get away with a smaller spacer. So you can kind of see right here, you see the gap between here is pretty big. And on the back here, I bought a pre-painted, rebuilt stock S2000 caliper in red, just to kind of give it that theme here. So now that we have the brakes on an S2000, we're just gonna test the ABS. We're at 30 miles. I hear the ABS kick on. Stop, no problem. The brakes are a little cold.
My neck.
So right now we're about 45 miles an hour. There's a dip right here. I'm gonna mash on the brakes before we get to the dip. Fifth gear. Hit it. Oh, here we go. Oh, nice. Here we go. Before the hydrant. Show the hydrant.